Texts stoprex.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light.
Lives here. This is WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
This is AP News. I'm Rita Foley. Impose more sanctions on Russia now. That's the plea this morning from Ukraine, which is asking the West to get tougher on Russia now that its troops have rolled into eastern Ukraine. Hit more, hit hard, hit now. That's the tweet from Ukraine's foreign minister. Western leaders are warning this dangerous situation could get even worse. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres with this plea.
I urge all to refrain from actions and statements that would take this dangerous situation over the brink.
AP correspondent Mike Gracia.
The next move in the showdown between Russia and the West over Ukraine is up to Vladimir Putin. Russian forces have moved into rebel-held areas in eastern Ukraine after Putin said he was recognizing the independence of the separatist regions. Led by the United States, Western powers drew the proverbial line in the sand, with President Joe Biden announcing
the first tranche of sanctions to impose costs on Russia.
Secretary Blinken held talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov that would have been held in Geneva later this week.
Diplomacy now rejected by Russia.
Okay, I have Reverend Johnson on the line. Would you like me to put her through?
Just give me 1 minute.
Okay.
Russian borders.
So
Hundreds of National Guard troops are being deployed to Washington, D.C. as the city prepares for trucker convoys that are planning protests against pandemic restrictions beginning next week.
Okay, you can bring her on
the
now.
Canadian truckers' protest of government pandemic restrictions in Canada.
Okay.
Year of the pandemic 20.
Pastor Vicki, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Sandy?
I am doing great, thank you.
Good.
Just. Okay. Excuse me, just trying to pull some of these pieces together. Okay. Pastor Vicki, I need you to speak so that we can hear you. We just want to make sure that your sound is right.
All righty. Well, good morning and God bless you. Want you to have a wonderful show today.
Thank
Be a
you.
blessing to yourself and to the people who are listening.
Well, now there you go. That is really the point now, isn't it?
Sounds good.
Okay, well, good. You do sound great this morning. So that is great. Let me get here. Let me pull this because this is good news. Good news, good news, good news. All right, let me pull that. And pull that. All right. Okay. All right. These last few minutes, I'm pulling together the last few stories and things like that. So, trying to see. Okay. Okay, where are we with time?
We've got about 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. I always Always let me know at the 1 minute mark, okay?
Yep. You actually, when you said that, mark, so
Okay, always do that.
perfect timing.
Always let me know that. Always let me know that. Not at the...
We've got 30 seconds now.
Thank you.
All right, 10 seconds.
Thank you.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world. This is the Santita Jackson Show. War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, February 23rd, 2022. Hope you had a wonderful day yesterday on 2/22/22, and hope we have a blessed day today on the 23rd of February. It's Wednesday. We got to talk about the Ahmaud Arbery case today. Yes, what happened there? And this trial almost did not happen. So let's talk about how and why it almost did not happen. And I want to know from you, what do you think about Ukraine? It seems that the winds of war are being amped up. I mean, they're blowing just harder and harder and harder. What do you think about that? Do you know about the details of on all sides? Really, I think that we have to look at this globally. We can't just look at this from our side. We have to look at these historical tensions that have brought us to this moment. So I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-WCPT. And I want you to meet my morning stars over here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Meet us over there. And of course, on my official Facebook page, the Santita Jackson Show page. Hope you'll meet me over there. And the Santita Jackson landing page, that is not where you meet me. You got to meet me at Santita Jackson. Excuse me, and friends. So everybody, please get on over there. I want to be friends with you. I want to be friends with you. So let's talk, everybody. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Let's talk about Ukraine. Let's talk about Ahmaud Arbery. You were really fired up about Daunte Wright yesterday. I want to hear your thoughts just about the latest in the news. What about this Wendy Williams show? She's not going to ever show anymore. Oh my gosh, God bless her. I hope that her health is restored. And she has still greater things to do. When I lived in New York, she just became a legend in radio and in all of talk. And so you always want people to do well. And Sherry Shepherd, congratulations to her. God bless her. Lovely, lovely people, and I wish them well. So let's get right to it, everybody. Let's get to some of these headlines before we get to the good news with Pastor Vicki Johnson in Chicago. We're going to have a high of 24 degrees and some snow showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 9 degrees above zero. Partly cloudy. The Dow closed down 482 points. There's a lot of volatility as we look at what's happening with the United States, NATO, Ukraine, Russia, now China. Yep, going to get to that in a few minutes. The Dow closed down 482 points. The NASDAQ closed down 166 points. The S&P 500 closed down 44 points. And last night, we had a relatively quiet time in sport. The Senators in the NHL, well, they were triumphant over the Wild, just by a point, just by a puck, everybody. 4-2-3. President Joe Biden unveiled tough new sanctions against Moscow yesterday in response to Russian military actions currently unfolding in Ukraine, calling the events, quote, the beginning of a Russian invasion. Now, that comes on the heels of an aggressive address by President Putin of Russia, who had a combative, as some people are calling it, address Monday from the Kremlin. It was a nearly hour-long recitation of decades worth of historical grievances. We're going to get into that in a little bit. In the meantime, China, which is on the other side of Russia, you've got Ukraine and Europe on one side, but they're bordered by China and they have friendly relations with China on the other side of Russia. Russia is really, it's Eurasia, and it's really smack dab in the middle of that. China has said that Moscow, get this everybody, has legitimate security concerns with NATO and Ukraine. Where will all of this go? We do not know, but we do know that we're going to be talking about this with Dr. David Gibbs of the University of Arizona. A jury has found 3 white men guilty who killed Ahmaud Arbery in 2020, guilty of all charges in their federal hate crimes trial. I want to know what you think about that, everybody. We're going to be talking with an all-star panel led by attorney C.K. Hoffler to talk about that today. Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, and their neighbor William Roddy Bryan were convicted of murder in state court, and yet Ahmaud Arbery's mother went after the DOJ yesterday. She said, you all wanted a plea deal, you wanted to plead this down, and it'll be very interesting to see. We saw the Attorney General of the United States get very emotional as he talked about this, but that did not stop her from hitting out at the DOJ yesterday, because she and her former husband had been pushing to get this trial. And we've, of course, got yet another trial. The prosecutors who tried to cover up this case. That is next. The Ahmaud Arbery case is not over, everybody. Pastor Vicki Johnson, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. What about you, Santita?
I am doing great, trying to let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight.
Amen.
Amen to that.
Amen. Well, good morning to all of your morning stars and friends. When we were children, we were always being taught to be independent. Our parents held our hands until we were able to walk alone. We drank from bottles until we could hold the cup with 2 hands and drink for ourselves. They tied our shoelaces until we were old enough, and they taught us to tie them on our own. They fed us to ensure we were properly nourished so that we could grow up to be healthy and strong. But once our sensory motor skills were developed and we mastered hand and eye coordination, we were left to feed ourselves. And how about that bike? We started out with a tricycle, then a 2-wheel bike with training wheels. And do you remember them running alongside the bike after taking the training wheels off, and all of a sudden you were riding alone? And of course, remember learning to drive? When I got my driver's permit, my daddy was always in the seat right next to me, sharing old driver's wisdom, like don't swing out to turn, or parked cars don't move when I was driving too close to them. Once that license was in hand, we were off and on our own. They did a great job of creating independent, productive people in society. They did not want us to need anything or anybody. Sometimes we are so independent now that when we actually do need some type of assistance, we don't even know how to ask for it. We might even feel it is a sign of weakness, when in actuality, it is a sign of strength. Galatians, the 6th chapter and the 2nd verse says, bear one another's burdens. We are here for each other. No one knows all and can be all. So here are 5 reasons to ask for help. 1, having help allows you to maintain your focus and energy. 2, when you ask for support, you create the opportunity for others to share their gifts and their talents. 3, When you ask for help, you allow others to feel happiness from being able to give of themselves. 4, when you ask for help, you are trusting in others, which can strengthen the bond. And 5, asking for help shows that you are imperfect, just like everyone else, which can increase the ability for others to relate to you. Getting help can free you to operate effectively and independently in your own area of expertise. Be willing to bear someone else's burden, but more importantly, be willing to let someone else bear your burden. It takes nothing away from your independence. If you will do this, and I believe you will, then to me, that's good news.
Amen to that. You know, if you need help, what was that song? We all need somebody.
We all need somebody
to lean on. Amen to that.
Bill Withers.
And thank you for being that for me down through the years. Sending much love to you. You are doing. You are celebrating.
Still Facebook Live.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let us know how we can be with you for that half hour of power.
Yeah. Yes, we are still on Facebook Live, St. Thomas Lutheran Church, Chicago, from 11:45 to 12:15, and we will be going back into the building the first Sunday in March.
Okay. God bless you. God bless you, everybody. That'll be 80th and Jeffrey, but that is at the beginning of March. At the beginning of March. In the meantime, your Facebook page one more time.
St. Thomas Lutheran Church, Chicago, on Facebook.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Sending you much love, Pastor Vicki Johnson. Pastor Vicki Johnson. We're bringing right up, Dr. Deborah Holden, epidemiologist, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University's School of Medicine, and Dr. Shanina Knighton, infection preventionist, research scholar at Case Western Reserve University. So glad to have you all here today. Of course, we're going to be at 6:40 shifting to talk about Ukraine. That is becoming more and more real for us, and they were discussing on the news this morning just how it might hit and maybe hurt Americans. We're going to have to be on the watch out. Wars are never held in isolation, everybody, but still praying for peace. And then, of course, Ahmaud Arbery. And that case, there's so many moving parts, and yet there is another trial coming, everybody. The prosecutors who tried to cover up for McMichaels and Mr. Bryan. You can't make this stuff up, but I'm so glad that it's coming out. Dr. Deborah Holden, why don't you kick things off for us today? Because, we have been talking about health inequities, and we're seeing that as we're watching. There's a lot going on. We're now hearing about the 4th booster shot, right? And shockingly, maybe I shouldn't be shocked, but I must tell you, at least I'm surprised. Only a little more than 28% of Americans really are actually considered to be fully vaccinated. 28% of those who've taken the shots, because everybody else are not taking the boosters. Why do you think, are the boosters necessary, number one? Where do we go from here with that, Dr. Verholden? Hey, India.
This morning, baby, India. I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
She just she's like, oh, you're going to be on the radio now? I have something to say too. So, yeah. So here's the deal, right? When the shots first came out, whether it be the 2-dose mRNA vaccines or the one shot Johnson & Johnson, those clinical trials were conducted with, the conditions at the time, and we learned what we learned. And then we learned over time about waning immunity and how the different types of antibodies that you produce in response to getting vaccinated will change over time. And in order to get that level of protection up, and we've done the work and they've done the studies, you need a booster shot. And so if you don't get the booster shot, then you won't have the full benefit of protection over time. That's not entirely new to just the COVID vaccine. It might be a little different for us to have to get the shots so close together, right? Because we're used to flu, right? Getting like an annual shot, not getting multiple shots within one season, you know. But again, we're just learning about this. So, yeah, you know, people want the full benefit, and it's unfortunate because a lot of people, including myself, aren't necessarily gung-ho on getting the vaccine, went and got it. And now we got to muster up that same level of motivation or enthusiasm or energy or whatever it is for people to get those booster shots. But yeah, if people want the full benefit, a booster will be in the picture.
Well, you know, I mean, Dr. Knight, what do you tell people? I mean, because I've just spoken, you take your little soul poll and you just ask people. Because I have to tell you, I was really surprised that so few people had taken the boosters. I've heard people say, look, I'm just going to wait till next year when they have another vaccine. I'm going to do this annually. I'm not taking a third or fourth booster. Please, maybe even more. What do you say to that?
I say two things. One, being that if it's necessary, there has to be better public health initiatives in explaining why. And the reason that is because people are skeptical because they're saying to themselves, I'm really trying to think about a point in time in history where I've ever had to be vaccinated this close in terms of a schedule. Meaning even with the measles, mumps, and rubella, right? You might have got one when you was a baby or two when you was a baby, then got another one when you was on your way to junior high. Sometimes you get another dose of something else when you're on your way to high school, right? So you say to yourself, okay, there's something that's spaced out years and years and years between it. But now we're talking about a vaccine that like literally has been encouraged like 3 to 4 doses within a year. And right now with us being in February, we can say 4 doses, right? Crossing a little bit over a year. We're talking about a vaccine that's still using the same formulation from March of 2020. So these are the arguments that people are making from the side of the public, and I cannot tell them like, oh, you're wrong, because truth of the matter is the science, even that I'm reading up on, has not been convincing enough for me to say, yeah, you absolutely should do this, or this is absolutely going to be of benefit for you. So that's the first thing. Second question that I think we all need to pose is what is really going on with coronavirus itself or COVID-19 that we feel as though we need 3 to 4 doses in 1 year. And if we need these 3 to 4 doses in 1 year, what is happening with our bodies? What is happening in regards to the history of this disease, okay, that is causing us to need all of these vaccines within such a short span of time? And is the risk worth the reward in the long term? I will tell anybody, yes, we can look at studies right now in 2022 and say that this is what the vaccine has done over the past couple of years. But what we do not know, and I've been transparent about this, is what mRNA does in the body over a long period of time. Yes, we have studies from 89 all the way up until now that talks about mRNA. It wasn't until 2 years ago that the mRNA was actually put inside of a human body. It wasn't in a medicine before. It wasn't in a vaccine before. So now that we have discovered that, yes, it is effective in doing what it does, but we're going to need all of these doses in order for it to do what it does, we still need the studies where that balances with human, where it balances with immunity, and does that immunity match for all populations? So it's been done for all. But now are we studying individual components, meaning what is the effectiveness amongst certain populations, not just based off of age and gender and race, but what does that look like when we're talking about other chronic conditions and other medications that it may interact with? Then do we say to ourselves, okay, the mRNA does focus on the spike protein and it shuts down those symptoms for COVID, but is it also shutting down symptoms for other things? So we have a lot of questions that still need to be answered. And so when the public has questions, then I think that it is up to our government and up to our leadership to be able to answer them. And the skepticism comes because there is this blank stare when it comes to answers that are not readily available for people. So when they say, well, have you all done any kind of scientific modeling of what this will do to my body over time? People don't have that information to feel any more comfortable today than what they did when they first initially took the vaccine. They did it with the hopes that we would be out of a pandemic. My concern, Santita, is that we're going to look up in the fall of next year, and I hate to say it, guys, I'm not being a Debbie Downer, but we'll be back in fall, and then they'll be talking about a new strain, and it'll be back on the radar again, and we'll be going through this again because we're not prepared.
Call me, text me at 773-763-9278. What do you make of all of this? And then, Dr. Deb and Dr. Knight, and I'd like to find out from you about this New York Times report. It's been pretty widely reported, but people have not discussed it. The CDC is not publishing large portions of the COVID data it collects. The story begins this way. For more than a year, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has collected data on hospitalizations for COVID-19 in the United States and broken it down by age, race, and vaccination status. But it has not made most of the information public. When the CDC published the first significant data on the effectiveness of boosters in adults younger than 65 2 weeks ago, it left out the numbers for a huge portion of that population, 18 to 49-year-olds, the group that data showed was least likely to benefit from extra shots because the first 2 doses already left them well protected. So that sounds like for that 18 to 49 group that they don't need the boosters. The boosters are really needed by people who are older or presumably whose health might be a little less robust. Is it important when we get back on the other side of the break, or you can maybe just give me a minute or so of this, Dr. Knighton, or I certainly want Dr. Verholden to answer this more fully. Is it important that this information be published? Do you think that would help people to know more, Dr. Knighton?
I do. I think that, but not just published, okay?
Explain.
It has to be done and presented in a manner. No, seriously, because the thing is, we can talk about a scientific article being published and then it not being easily readable by the public. And we can
not
also
explained.
talk about
interpret it for me.
Yeah, or the interpretation, right, from the media and it being all wrong. I was actually going through statistics yesterday, and many people don't know is that, yes, while they're saying that there's been an increase of COVID hospitalizations, we're not celebrating the fact that there's been a decrease in overall utilization of emergency departments, which was really hitting the bottom line, right? And so to be able to understand, like, the wins and the losses of the situation, I think is something that we should be looking or taking a closer look at. How has telemedicine changed that? How has people's reliance on emergency departments and screenings changed that? How has it impacted, minorities in regards to that possibly being in a negative manner? We know that, there's discrepancies when it comes down to certain populations being more affected than others.
Sure.
So I just, out of all the technology that we have and the innovation, you're not going to tell me that we don't have a better way to communicate science and a better way to help people to understand how it is moving. We think that these are fundamental things that people learn, but they don't, it's not the case all the time.
Well,
my kids are learning about a hypothesis now, but they may not know later.
I can't believe people who are celebrated for intellect and certainly academic development could be this happy. Just like, I guess common sense ain't common or something. And you're reopening, it seems like business is ahead of the science here. They're just reopening everything. You're going to be able to go to festivals this summer. No vaccination, no nothing. And so maybe did the vaccines or these shots that became vaccines, did they give us herd immunity? No, because you can still get it. You can still transmit it. What are we supposed to do here? Let's talk about this on the Santita Jackson Show, and then we're going to pivot to Ukraine at 6:40. We need to know what is going on. What is going on? They're saying that that we could feel it in the United States. What would that mean? What would that mean? What would that mean? People comparing this to like World War II. That time, Americans were split about going into getting involved in the European conflict then. So what do you think? Call me at 773-763-9278. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Dr. Deb, let us hear the baby. Please.
All right, come get your baby.
No, would you let us hear her, please? Please.
Look what you do to our baby, Dr. Deb.
That's
She
right.
don't cry.
Let us hear this baby, please. Please.
I'm like, come get your baby.
Oh, please. You know what?
Dr. Deb, because we know India don't cry, okay?
She does. That's all right. You know, my father would hear babies would start crying when he would be preaching, and people would start like, I gotta get my baby out of here. My father's like, look, I got a lot of babies at home. Let that baby cry. That means that baby's all right. Just, it's okay.
Yeah, she's the cutest about it. Hi, cutie. Hi. Oh my God.
Bless your heart. She was like, she wanted to get up with grandma. Like I used to get up with my grandma. Ooh, and I'd get in bed with my mama Helen. Oh, before she'd go into that beauty shop. And I'd take some sips from her hyper sweetened, very white coffee. That's why I like my coffee that way right now. Get in bed with her. Plus she was let's say she was fluffy. And so she felt real soft. It was good getting in bed with her. Ooh, look, I think about that now and I'm like, oh, that was like a highlight of my life. And her bed was real high and I'd climb up in that bed. Oh, whoo, have a little piece of toast with that coffee. Oh, girl, you're taking me back. Oh, we had fun. Then we go have breakfast. Then we go into the dining room and have breakfast. But oh boy, it was great. So it's just wonderful. But Dr. Deb, I want you to speak to that because you have been talking about the importance of reporting. I just came across this story. I've been coming across it, but I just said let me go back to it. About the importance of collecting data on hospitalizations and just by race and by age, vaccination status, and in other areas, but the fact that it's not being made public, I think that, has people feeling some kind of way.
Some of this I take with a grain of salt because, like, when I hear ED visits are down, I think of my aunt who stroked out at home because she was too afraid to go to the emergency department. Mm-hmm. She wasn't used to telehealth. She just wasn't accessing the emergency department. I just think there's a big missed opportunity here to do the kind of surveillance and data collection. And then the literature has been flooded with so much bad research and bad studies because things are getting published a lot faster. People are kind of sidestepping, the peer review process. Mm-hmm. There's a concern about the literature also being flooded with bad science. Right?
Oh no, but put that out there. Put that out there. Let people know.
1 minute.
Because this is a headline from the New York Times. Yeah. And it's being published. It's being published everywhere. And so that it's important because transparency is an issue. And it's an issue for everything now. People are questioning everything.
And that's dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
30 seconds.
The reason that's dangerous is because, like, literally, I'm never going to go to my personal trainer or my fitness coach and say, I know how to do your job and I can do your job better than you, right? Mm-hmm. Or I'm not going to question what it is they're doing, just because I feel intuitively like I should.
10 seconds.
So there's this balance to that, right? Of like understanding people's expertise and asking questions and still not trying to create your own narrative.
Well,
and
that's
I do
true.
agree with that.
Hold on. And remember, we're at 6:40. You can get Dr. Gibbs up.
We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. We're going to be talking with Dr. David Gibbs about, professor of history from the University of Arizona, about Ukraine. It seems that we're getting closer and closer to war. And I don't think it's going to stay in Europe, everybody. I think it's something that we could feel here. We're going to be talking with him about that, and then we'll be talking about the Ahmaud Arbery case. And there is yet another trial. The prosecutors who tried to cover all of this up, who tried to save the McMichael family and Mr. Bryan. Unbelievable. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. We're talking with Dr. Deborah Verholden, epidemiologist and Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University School of Medicine, and Dr. Shanina Knight, an infection preventionist, about, we're talking about our health, and we're expanding the conversation. But today, the CDC isn't publishing large portions of the COVID data it collects. Now, as we're beginning to open up, fully, and dropping COVID restrictions and requirements, the Coachella Festival and other music festivals will not require, increasingly, vaccinations, positive or negative COVID tests. Much of that is falling by the wayside. And so we're seeing that the CDC, they're not publishing large, tranches of information that they have. Is that important to you? Do you need to know everything? Are you even paying attention? I want to know. Dr. Deborah Verholden, you help us to understand with this.
Well, I want to be real clear. A lot of the data the CDC has is not the most robust data.
Okay, I need you to say that one more time.
A lot of the data that the CDC has is not the most robust data. We're not being intentional enough and proactive enough about collecting the type of data that we need to be collected. So as a result, I think what we're finding is people cobble together what they can to try to understand what's happening. And I just think that's a missed opportunity. We actually need to be proactive in the cause of improving both data infrastructure as well as the data gathering. There's no reason at this stage in this pandemic we should be left with so many more questions than we have answers, because we're just not, I don't think, doing the best job of tracking what's happening. So then that data should be made publicly available, at least through a process, right? Researchers should be able to petition and get that data, so it's not even just one group or one scientist who's trying to make sense of that data. There's an expression that we use in public health when it says there's lies, and statistics. I've seen people do all kinds of funny things with stats, and I've watched people play around with data and just keep controlling and adjusting until they could, cast that statistical fishing rod and come back with the association that they were seeking. And that's not good science either. So I think we need better, intentional, systematic data collection across a range of topics. And we just need to honor the sort of scientific practices of, peer review and, credibility and publication, and better engage health communications so that we can then get these things communicated to the public in ways that make sense for them and that are actionable, that aren't fear-provoking, but instead empowering.
Well, if you could speak with your colleagues, very quickly, what would you tell them to do? Because only 28% of us have gotten boosted. So there's a disconnect here.
Yeah, I do believe the vaccine is safe and effective. And, it's such a tough thing, because as all of these other restrictions are being peeled back, there are a lot of people I know who are just, not in favor of what's happening in schools. They do not want kids just thrust back in schools with no masks and without all the other proper provisions and like that. And a lot of these people haven't vaccinated their children yet. You know, so my thing is, well, if you're, you know, really concerned, the thing that's in your hand that you can do is get your child vaccinated. You know, so, you know, I just encourage people, activate those layers of protection, including, and I'm not trying to shift the personal responsibility onto individuals, but there is a lot that's in people's hands. And it is a little disappointing that so many people got the shots, but then won't get the booster.
Okay, let me bring up Anita very quickly before we go to Dr. Gibbs. Anita from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Anita, what's on your mind? You said you have a question or a comment.
My question is, okay, maybe question, comment. I want to say this really quick. This is really funny. I thought you would call her Doctor for holding. I thought you was telling her thanks for holding. Is that her?
Oh,
I think that's her real last.
No. It's Dr. Fur hyphen Holden. Bless your heart. What's on your mind?
Anyway, I just had to crack a joke this morning.
Oh, of course, we love you. Absolutely.
You know, what was the scientist's name? Carver, I think it was. They said that they neutered, you know, they took his private area away because they wanted him in some slave master's house, and he didn't want him to.
Oh, George Washington Carver. That was rumored. I'd never gotten confirmation of that, but we had heard that.
Well, if it's true, I mean, how sick is that? On top of being a slave, you're going to tell him he better not do nothing to you. I mean, you're doing everything to his, you know, his family and stuff, you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
so
But what's your comment about vaccines? Because I'm going to have to pivot to another topic.
If they can get that drastic and extreme for, I mean, 500 years in this almost, you know, I mean, what's the change? I mean, it's the same system. We got to make money. Our blood is money. We live by blood. We don't have flesh and blood. They live by green money. So if these people are thinking like that and making bad, uneducated decisions and acting like no other human being is in the earth, and if people don't work 18 years to bring a child in the world and get them out of high school, and I mean, they're not responsible for all the labor and things that people have to do to produce people to work for them.
So let me ask you this very quickly.
Like they are and they're not.
Well, Anita, very quickly, because I got to talk about Ukraine.
Okay.
You're saying, are you saying that you want more personal freedom when it comes to whether you get the vaccines or not?
Well,
or would you like more testing, just very quickly?
Okay. Well, I mean, they can't make all the decisions like they assume we can't make all the decisions. So their business has to suffer like our children suffer and our families suffer too. I mean, they can't have it all their way.
She's pushing back against Big Pharma. Sending you much love. Anita from North Carolina, who used to be in Chicago. That's all right. We're so glad that you still stay in touch with us. Dr. Deborah Furholden and Dr. Knighton. Dr. Furholden, in about 30 seconds, how do you want to wrap this up today? Where do we go from here with these boosters? Are you giving me all of your brilliance on mute?
No, I was going to give Dr. Knighton the last word, but I'll say this for people. I had to navigate these waters for myself. And I'm going to go back to something that I think is very basic. Everybody needs a primary health care provider. You know, everybody needs that. People should be having these conversations with their primary health care provider, who really, I do think, should be able to help you navigate both getting the vaccine and then knowing when to get the booster. I am really excited about a lot of the other work that I know is happening in different places across the country, where we're doing things like serology testing to understand biologically where people are with their, COVID serology and how that might impact or change who gets a booster and when and all that. You know, I found it very interesting. Most places that do COVID testing don't do COVID vaccines, and most places that do COVID vaccines do not do COVID testing. And you aren't supposed to get vaccinated if you're COVID positive. But with 50% of people asymptomatic or symptoms that they don't recognize, how do you know that? So not testing people before you vaccinate them sort of seems a little odd given the recommendation. And then also, when people think they have COVID, for a lot of people, that's one of those moments where they have a change of heart about getting the vaccine. but then it's not readily available to them at the places where they get testing. So there's just a lot that I think as we continue to move forward and figure out what life, post-pandemic or post this first 2 years of pandemic will look like, that we can do better on. And I think we will.
I hope so.
Because this need for people to re-engage and all of that, if we can accompany that with some better, practices overall, I think that's what's going to serve us the best and help to prevent us from just feeding the next surge.
Absolutely. Dr. Deborah Verholden, everybody. Michigan State University School of Public Health, their Associate Dean at the Michigan State University School of Medicine, and Dr. Shanina Knight, at Hey Dr. Nina. That's right. And at Dr. Deb Verholden. Of course, she's at Case Western Reserve University. Infection preventionalist. Let us welcome to the show once again Professor David Gibbs from the University of Arizona, history professor. He is really an expert on Eastern European affairs, and he has been giving us a lot of history and information about Ukraine. Well, now it seems, Dr. Gibbs, that we're beating the drums of war. They're much louder this week than they were last week when you and I spoke. And now they're talking, President Biden is talking an invasion. Ukraine is moving to impose a state of emergency. We've imposed limited sanctions. Some people say that we need to amp them up, and on and on and on. And now China is in it. Professor Gibbs is saying, you know what? They're warning the U.S. that a full-scale confrontation could ensue, and that Moscow has legitimate concerns about their border. What is going on, and where is all of this going?
Well, the most immediate event was that there are two separate states that formed out of the Ukraine called Donetsk and Luhansk that are in the eastern part of the Ukraine. These are Russian-speaking areas that are very pro-Russian. They've always been pro-Russian. And in 2014, when the U.S. helped to overthrow the elected government of the Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk separated from Ukraine and formed two states. And Russia, under the table, was supporting them, whereas the U.S. was supporting the new government, which the U.S. helped to install in Kiev. And they've continued supporting it ever since. However, this was all under the table. What happened yesterday was that Russia officially recognized the independence of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states. They hadn't done that before. And they appear to be on the verge, or maybe have already done so, of possibly sending in regular Russian forces to assist the local militias in repelling the Ukrainian army. I'm not quite sure where the current status of that is, but they appear to be on the verge of doing that or have done it already. And so this is definitely an amping up of the tension. Putin is a very careful chess player. He plays one step at a time. He's, I suspect, much more effective at this than his American counterparts. I think the next move on his part is probably to conclude some type of an alliance with China, possibly with Iran, sort of reestablishing a new Cold War, basically, in the world. But I do think we should not excuse Putin's actions here, which I do not support. But this has all been the main player here who have been amping up tensions is the United States. And again, I've been emphasizing this in your show repeatedly. I'll just note it again. The United States promised not to expand NATO in 1990, violated the agreement not to expand NATO. And that's the main source of the problem here, that Russia has said again and again it does not want the Ukraine to join NATO, and the U.S. insists it will allow Ukraine to join NATO, and that's non-negotiable. And this all could have been prevented if the United States had agreed not to let Ukraine into NATO. And the United States refuses to do that, and that's why we have a crisis today. It would also have helped if the U.S. hadn't overthrown the Ukrainian government in 2014, which it did. So that's where things stand right now.
What about China now? Really discussing the border dispute, and they're saying that, actually, they're aligning themselves with Russia, it appears. How would that play itself out?
Well, the U.S. is also seen to wanting to antagonize China as well. China is whether the U.S. likes it or not, China is an emerging power. It already surpasses the U.S. in the size of its economy, and that'll continue over time. And the U.S. just has to recognize the fact that China is an emerging power and has to deal with China. And instead, the United States seems determined to antagonize China and treat it like an adversary, which, of course, will make it an adversary. It has to be emphasized that, there's a drumbeat of attention to the military threat from China and Russia. These countries spend far less on the militaries than the U.S. does. Even China, which has a larger economy, spends, I believe, about a third of what the U.S. spends on its military. Russia spends less than 10% of what the U.S. spends. For all the sensationalism about the Russian threat, its military budget is about the size of Saudi Arabia in any given year. And so, this is tremendously exaggerated, and it almost seems as if the United States is looking for trouble and is finding trouble in terms of triggering a new Cold War. I think many listeners, I'm old enough to remember the old Cold War and remember how scary and dangerous it was. And what's going on now is actually much more dangerous because the U.S. basically is provoking conflict right on Russia's borders. And that's really very, very dangerous indeed. And even though Russia doesn't spend that much on its military budget, it does have, as a legacy of the Cold War, 1,000 active nuclear warheads. And there really is an emerging danger here of nuclear war. And I think the American foreign policy establishment is really being very careless in courting danger in the way that it is doing.
Is this carelessness or hubris? And excessive pride and excessive belief. Well, a belief in American exceptionalism, right? I mean, we are the biggest, the strongest, the baddest, and nothing can ever happen to us. And I'm like, well, I don't think we should really think that way.
Can I ask a question?
Hold on one second, Dr. Knighton. Hold on. I'm sorry, Doctor, and I'll get right to you, Dr. Knighton. But Dr. Gibbs.
Yes. Hubris, I think, is the word. I think it's an excellent word to describe what's going on here, a kind of almost a sense that the United States can walk on water and that the rules don't apply to the United States. For most countries, international agreements are binding. For the U.S., international agreements don't really mean anything. The U.S. sees it as its right to violate international agreements. It's done in multiple contexts over many decades. And the violation of the 1990 agreement with Russia not to expand NATO is on the latest iteration of that. And there's somehow a sense that, it's the same kind of hubris that got us involved in Iraq and Afghanistan. It was felt that, the United States can go and invade Iraq and Afghanistan and everything will be just fine. Well, it wasn't just fine. We just saw the catastrophic U.S. exit from Afghanistan. We all saw it on our TV screens. You see the U.S. foreign policy establishment. You see, the members, the people from the State Department, people from, think tanks connected to the foreign policy establishment, and they seem very confident and very smooth, and they have their, Ivy League degrees and so on. They're much less competent than they seem, and anybody who doubts that should have a look at some of the videos of the U.S. evacuation from Afghanistan. That was not competent, and it does give you some sense of the weakness of leadership we're having here that is getting us into this new mess.
When they told us to get out, we said, we want to stay past August 31st, so we can get some things together. They said, no, you have until that date, that date certain, and you must leave.
Yeah, right.
It says,
again, the U.S. sees it as its right to do whatever it wants. I'm sorry, what are you going to say?
Oh, no, please continue.
Well, I just think that, I think this impression I have is the American public is war weary after 20 years of a war on terror with nothing positive to show for it. I don't sense there's any enthusiasm for war among the American public, even though
Dr. Knighton dropped
the elite. A very striking thing to me is that Joseph Biden has got no significant boost in his popularity. It's been very low for months, and it hasn't improved at all because of this conflict. That's very unusual. Usually, the public rallies around the flag. That's the phrase political scientists use. The president gets a boost in his popularity when there's a crisis. This is one of the very few times I can think of where that simply hasn't happened at all. And I think this should really establish a certain amount of caution in the foreign policy establishment. And I'm not seeing any caution here. There seems to be kind of a reckless disregard, both of public opinion as well as any kind of caution or prudence in courting really very dangerous conflict with Russia, starting a new Cold War with Russia. That's avoidable. And that's the important thing here. This is easily avoidable. But the U.S. establishment doesn't want to avoid it.
Brian from Romeoville. Brian, what's on your mind today?
Well, first of all, my compliments to the good doctors. I appreciate all your input over the months. Smarter people than me have said that China is looking to see how we react, because if they can get away with it, they're going to take Taiwan. And then my final comment is that if the Democrats aren't perfect, but if the GOP had not been messing with Russia for even farther back than the Trump administration, I mean, 10 years or better, they're enamored with Russia and Trump, we wouldn't be in this mess.
What do you think, Dr. Gibbs?
There are two questions. One is on China and Taiwan. I think the danger of Taiwan is greatly overrated for a very simple reason. Taiwan is an island. And in military history, there's a term called the stopping power of water. It's very, very difficult to invade by sea. Very few countries have the capability to do that, and China does not have the capability to do that. That requires a very large navy, including aircraft carriers. It requires amphibious infantry, which China doesn't really have. It requires a lot of experience using these things. China doesn't really have the capability to invade Taiwan. So, I mean, even if it wanted to, even if it's willing to pay the economic and political consequences of doing it, which I don't think they are willing to do that, they don't have the capability to invade Taiwan. So I think this is a greatly overrated risk. As far as the Republican Party, you know, I don't like Donald Trump, and I see many. He was a very bad president and a bad person, but I think it is largely a myth that he was pro-Russian. He was exactly the opposite. I mean, he made a lot of pleasantries about what a nice guy Putin was, but if you look at his policies, he was much harder on Russia than Obama was. You know, he was the first one to deliver anti-tank missiles to the Ukrainian government to be used against pro-Russian separatists in Donetsk and Luhansk. You know, he upped the level of sanctions against Russia well beyond what Obama had done. And so I don't really see any evidence at all that he was pro-Russian. It's exactly the opposite. I think this is just partisan politics. I mean, I think the Democrats were very foolish to constantly hammer away at Russiagate. I don't think there was anything there at all. They could have much more easily gone after Trump for just ordinary, old-fashioned corruption. That they could have easily demonstrated. But I think they went after him on the Russia issue because they had a plan of wanting to, you know, prepare the public for a new Cold War with Russia. They were trying to increase tensions with Russia. They were trying to simultaneously hurt Trump, but also lay the groundwork for a Cold War with Russia, which is exactly what we have here. I think it would be better if people on the left would leave partisan politics out of it. One of the awkward problems we have, and we have to be honest about this, is there's a very strong anti-war movement among libertarians, right-wing libertarians. I'm not a libertarian. I don't like libertarianism, but politics is politics, and sometimes you have to make alliances with people you disagree with.
I agree with them on that, Dr. Gibbs. I don't have to align with you politically, straight down the line.
Right.
But I am pro-peace, period. Yep. And if I intersect with you on that, well, I diverge with you on 99% of everything else, okay, I'm going to save a life. And then I'll argue with you about everything else later. I've got about 20 seconds for you, Dr. Gibbs, and you've got to come back because this is just the drum beat is just, it's louder. 20 seconds.
Okay, I think a final point I want to make is the new Cold War with Russia is going to have a major impact on American living standards. War or preparations for always diverts resources from living standards. It always does that. You have a trade-off between guns and butter. And the government seems to have chosen guns over butter. And I think the American public do need to realize that this is going to come out of their pocketbooks. This will hurt their living standards.
And off your dining room table and out of your baby's mouth. Think about that. We'll be talking about Ahmaud Arbery in just a couple minutes on the Santita Jackson Show. Dr. Knighton called back. We called her back because I wanted her. She wanted to ask you a question, Dr. Gibbs, if you don't mind. Now, she's an infection preventionist, brilliant scientist, and registered nurse. But she heard you, and if you could bring that down, Matt. Thank you, sweetie. Dr. Knighton, you wanted to speak with Dr. Gibbs?
Yes. So, Dr. Gibbs, I remember like back last April, so April of 2021, I remember seeing in June of 2021 that Russia, like they were removing the dollar assets from the Wealth Fund. Then you had Biden that was going back and forth, like he had borrowed like the U.S. banks from buying Russia government debt. And this was all going on last April, right? And so you look up now, and we're on the brink of war because of Ukraine. And I guess my question to you as an expert is how much does that issue of Russia withdrawing their money, the U.S., in retaliation saying that they're not getting ready to, they don't want the banks to back them, like how much does that play into where we are today with this whole Ukraine and Russia discrepancy?
Dr. Gibbs? Did he drop? Oh, no. Oh, I'm so sorry, Shanina. Well, you know what?
He dropped right as we went to break.
It's a question that I've honestly been wanting to know for some time now because that made major headlines.
I'm going to bring him back.
Seemed to kind of go quiet.
No, I'm going to bring him back. I'm going to bring him back because it's about the money. This is about business. We didn't get a chance to talk about Nord Stream, which is the pipeline between Ukraine and Germany, Russia and Germany, going through Ukraine. I mean, this is big stuff. This is about more than Putin and his personality. And this is about a lot more. And now you have President Trump getting in it, and so they're shaping this in a partisan way. So I guess if you don't want war, that means they're going to call you someone who's aligned with Trump, former President Trump, which is not true. So
it's not. But just to your point,
that's what they're going to do.
Bonds over butter. And I think that's a heck of an analogy, but we already know what happens with war. We already got too many wars going on. We can't even resolve some of the issues that we have. So I'm just curious to know, like, how much that plays into it. And
I'm sorry, that was me.
If that's impacted our market. Yeah, if that's impacted our markets already, because I'm sure that it has.
Oh, if you saw what was happening,
nobody talked about it.
You saw it yesterday with the stock market. I mean, it was all over the place. And and this is not something that don't ignore it. I take my little soul poll, ask people kind of sort of what they want to talk about. And I know I've been pushing the Ukraine story because I know that this is something that we're going to have to live with, you guys. I mean, this is not something that is not going to impact us.
But you see that we go from a war on COVID to now an actual physical war. Yeah. It's like,
instead of dealing with the fact that the money's tight, okay? They talk about Russian oligarchs. America is run by the oligarchy. Are you kidding me? They're run by the big businessmen and women who run the government, primarily men, who run everything. They have their hands all over the levers of power. That's what they do. That's what Russia is controlled by businessmen. So is the United States. They control the world. They're the ones who are telling you that the pandemic is over because everybody needs to get back to work. That's what's happening here. It has nothing to do with science. None of that.
I agree.
None of it. And you just ought to be tired of it. And you need to know what's going on here. That's why I'm bringing him on. And as I have said before, I'm going to reach out to Malcolm Nance, who should be back in the country now. Malcolm Nance, I absolutely have tremendous respect for him and appreciate his point of view. But I'm a person of peace. I'm not from the intelligence community. I'm from the civil rights community. I'm from the church. That's where I came in. Okay, everybody, you need to know that. And when you hear Dr. Gibbs, when you hear Bryce Green, when you hear Medea Benjamin on my show, they're on this show because they can't get on anyplace else. All the people who you hear talking about Ukraine on television are military, they're intelligence, they're pro-war. I'm not. And I make no apologies for that. None. So I'm going to have
Okay,
a
we have attorneys Hoffler, Jones, Patillo, and Griggs ready. Would you like me to put them through?
Absolutely. So I will say to you, blessed are the peacemakers. Beat your swords into plowshares. That's where I am with that. And I'm going to bring the people who are fighting to make that happen onto this show. Everybody else, you hear every place else. And you can hear some of that here too. I want to be fair. But I'm very clear that I'm not just going to be pro-war because of Democrats in the presidency. I'm not with that. I'm into peace. Period. And we are going to feel this over here. And most of us still don't know where Ukraine is. Okay? So, okay, I can hear someone. I think someone's in a car. So just... Oh, is that? Oh, hey, Griggs.
1 minute.
If you would, doing great. I'm so glad you're with us today. Do me this favor. Stay on mute, and then we'll call. Then CK or I will call upon you. Okay.
Okay.
But we definitely, CK, we should probably come up to him.
Santita.
Right.
Good morning. I was just saying good morning.
Oh, no. Good morning. Good morning to you, Daryl Jones. Good morning, Daryl.
Good morning, Santita. Good morning, everybody.
Saw you on TV yesterday. And good morning, Robert Patillo.
Good morning. 30 seconds.
Gave a tremendous address at church. I think you want to go into the ministry. Oops. He was great. Everybody call us at 773-763-9278. Let's talk about Ahmaud Arbery in that
10
case.
seconds.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody, let's have a great show. Okay, of course, I'm going to have that read.
Change the world, change the world. Can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT. We used to be Air America, but today we are WCPT and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. We've been talking about Ukraine with Dr. David Gibbs. If you want to hear that conversation, if you want to get the latest and the greatest on COVID-19 and our health with Doctors Verholden and Knighton, and if you want to hear this conversation about Ahmaud Arbery and the case that is yet to come about the prosecutorial misconduct in this case. The prosecutors who tried to cover up the murder. Yeah, that's what they were trying to do. We'll be talking about that with this magnificent all-star panel on legal Q&A with CK on the Santita Jackson Show. It's Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022. Let's get to some of these headlines and get to the rest of the show. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 24 degrees above zero, snow showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 9 degrees above zero. Got to say that in this part of the country. Partly cloudy. The Dow closed down 482 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed down 166 points, and the S&P 500 closed down 44. Lots of volatility as people are concerned about Ukraine. Let me start off with some good news before we get to a couple of these other headlines. Thousands of Chicago public school students and some parents will get full college scholarships because of the Hope Chicago Fund. They stunned families at the Benito Juarez High School with this announcement yesterday. God bless them. Eventually, 24,000 students and 6,000 parents will get scholarships at Benito Juarez Community Academy High School. It's a great high school, and to see them all cheering and to see these young people and their parents get this opportunity to get this education, may God bless them. Former CPS CEO Janice Jackson, who stepped down from that post to run Hope Chicago, made this announcement. God bless her and God bless them, everybody. At Juarez, about 81% of the students graduate from that high school, and 55% of those who graduate immediately enroll in college. Congratulations, Benito Juarez High School, everybody. President Joe Biden unveiled tough new sanctions against Moscow yesterday in response to the Russian military's actions currently unfolding in the Ukraine, calling the events the beginning of a Russian invasion. In the meantime, China is saying that Moscow has legitimate security concerns, and Putin's address has taken a swipe at the U.S. world order, really established after the Second World War. There's a lot that we're going to continue to talk about with respect to this situation on the Santita Jackson Show, because we are going to feel this in the United States, everybody. Be clear on that. This is not just going to happen. This is not just going to happen in over there. So everybody, let me just bring a good word to you about home ownership. 300,000 African Americans have moved out of Chicago because we couldn't hold on to our homes. I mean, it's really been a very, very, very challenging period, given the fact that Chicago has been the center of Black wealth and political power for decades. But guess what? There is hope that is on the way. It's right here. Team Hochberg wants to help you to get your credit together, to establish your credit, to restore your credit. If you want to purchase a home, if you want to buy one of those 2 or 3 flat buildings that no one's staying in your neighborhood, he wants to bring people to you to make that happen. Believe it or not, you can have no money and make some money. And they know how to help you to do that. So if you're purchasing a new home, refinancing your existing home, securing a VA loan, or even if you want to get a reverse mortgage, you need to do what I'm asking you to do, which is call Team Hochberg. Pete posted a 5-star Google review along with hundreds of others, and it's helped him to, as he got in touch with Team Hochberg, he saved over $800 a month, almost $10,000 a year, after completing a cash refinance with the help of Team Hochberg. He listened to this radio station, and he thought that he was in debt over his head. But he reached out to them, he got a free consultation, they worked out an arrangement, and guess what? They were able to save him almost $10,000 a year, reestablish his credit, and help him to hold on to his home, everybody. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com, 56david.com, and let's keep our homes, everybody. Let's keep our homes. Let's do that. All right, everybody, a legal Q&A with CK. CK, you've got a tremendous panel with us today. We saw Daryl Jones from the Transformative Justice Coalition, Attorney Daryl Jones, standing with the Arbery family yesterday, and of course, Attorney Gerald Griggs from the NAACP in Atlanta, of course, still calling out for an executive order on voting rights, on justice and policing, and we do need that. And of course, we have got Attorney Robert Patillo, Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push. Both of you are on WAOK. Of course, yesterday, you were on your radio show on WAOK. That's at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday. Robert Patillo is 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time every Sunday. And you had Reverend Jackson. You had an all-star lineup. Who else did you have on your show talking about this case yesterday, CK?
Good morning, Santita. I had, as you said, Reverend Jackson. I had Daryl Jones from Transformative Justice Coalition. I had Barbara Arnwine from Transformative Justice Coalition. I had Attorney Ben Crump. And I also had Mrs. Arbery, the matriarch of the family, Darlene Jackson Arbery, who spoke yesterday. And so we did have an all-star lineup and they were really speaking from the courthouse. It was right after their press conference. And so it was just so great to be able to get the insight from the team, the people who were there in the trenches who helped to make this happen. And of course, Reverend Jackson, whose shoulders we all stand on and who showed us how to do this, who showed us the way and who's been fighting this good fight for over 6 decades.
Well, let me ask you this.
It was really great.
As you open this up and talk to the panel about this case, guilty, guilty, guilty. That is the headline in Common Dreams. The jury convicts all 3 assailants for the Ahmaud Arbery murder. And many people were worried because it was a majority white jury that this would not happen. But they just saw some evidence that was you just couldn't deny it. All of the racist text messages and the conversations that they've been having down through the years, you were very clear that they were just filled with racial hatred toward Black people in particular. But I want to know from you, I mean, now you saw Attorney General, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland become emotional yesterday, and he would not respond to criticism of the DOJ. that he ignored
Yeah.
the family of Ahmaud Arbery, and his mother. His mother went after the DOJ yesterday, and she wasn't being disrespectful. But explain what happened there. What happened with this plea deal and this trial that many people are saying that almost didn't happen? What happened?
Well, first of all, Santita, the moral to the story and the lesson here is you should never give up. You should always continue to fight. When something doesn't feel right, it's probably because it's not right. Well, what happened was the Justice Department, as we know, filed a lawsuit and it was in federal court, for hate crimes under the federal hate crime statute. And essentially, just if you boil it down to its core, we saw the murder trial, the McMichaels and Bryan murder trial, where they murdered Ahmaud Arbery, and they were convicted across the board. But this case was different. This case was solely based on the motivation behind the murder. So that's a distinction. So you've got the underlying murder crime that they had to prove, but really they had to prove that this was based on racial animus, based on racial discrimination or hatred. And they had a plethora of evidence, from social media posts to text messages to conversations that each of the defendants had with people, friends, over time. And this became very critical because some of the social media posts and the text messages were really, really, really strong in using the N-word, really reflecting that they wanted to get rid of Black folks, and how we're problems, how we're trouble. And so when you put all of that together, and because they use inflammatory language like kill, get rid of, you put all of that together, and you have Ahmaud Arbery, who is jogging in their development. And it just all clicked. This was the opportunity. And they did exactly what their social media, text messages, conversations, and mindset reflected leading up until that point. And they killed in the most heinous way this young Black man for no reason at all. So that's why there was a conviction across the board. The jury deliberated very little time. They came back, they deliberated a little bit the day before. And when you get past, the protocols of the jury instructions and all that, and then the next morning, the first question that came out was, what part of the jury instructions do I read from the foreperson? That told me right there. I was doing legal commentary on Court TV when that came out. That told me right there they had a verdict. And the other lawyers that were on with me on Court TV didn't want to call it, but I called it, and I said they're going to convict them across the board. Because I just felt the evidence was there. But, I know enough, and I've been a trial lawyer for long enough to know even when the evidence is there, sometimes the jury doesn't take it. And jurors some of them don't believe there's such a thing as discrimination. But in this case, it was so compelling. There was so much hatred and venom that the jury probably felt this is a no-brainer and convicted them on all fronts. So William Roddy Bryant, who was going to maybe be eligible for parole and get out, he's going to be in jail more than likely if this conviction stands for the rest of his life like the other two.
Well, who else is on the panel today, and what are their comments?
Well, we have an extraordinary panel here today. We have Gerald Griggs, from the Atlanta metropolitan area. He's a leader in the NAACP, a civil rights lawyer. He's been a defense lawyer as well. He's been a prosecutor, extraordinarily talented lawyer, and compassionate and passionate advocate here in Georgia. We also have Daryl Jones, the chair of the board of Transformative Justice Coalition. Oh, my goodness. We saw him, and we've seen him for months. See, it became in vogue to go to Brunswick, Georgia. But when it wasn't in vogue, in the beginning, there was Transformative Justice Coalition, organizations like Rainbow Push Coalition that were there in Brunswick day in and day out. Barbara Arnwine, the president and founder of Transformative Justice Coalition, and Daryl Jones, the chair of Transformative Justice Coalition, were there fighting the good fight. As a matter of fact, the defendants, you'll remember, in the first state trial, wanted to shut them down, prevent them from protesting. And I will say they hired me. I was ready to fight. I said, Santita, it's not going to happen in my lifetime where you're going to shut down people. I was like, what kind of situation is this? But anyway, so that's Daryl Jones. And then we got Robert Patillo. What can I say about him? You've already said he is an international media sensation. That's what I call him. But he's also the Southwestern Regional Director of Rainbow Push Coalition.
here in our offices here in the Atlanta metropolitan area. Extraordinary lawyer as well. He does criminal defense. He does civil rights. So this panel is a panel of superstars.
Absolutely. Well, you know what we've got? You were able to corral Attorney Griggs, and we're catching him in between appointments. In fact, I think you're on your way to Brunswick, Georgia?
Brunswick. It's on his way to Brunswick.
All right. So
I think we should call on him first to kind of set the table, and because he's been there as well. And he is part of many, many fights that we have on the front lines in Georgia. We did some voting rights litigation. And by the way, we represented Transformative Justice Coalition and Rainbow Push in that litigation. So I just feel like we are in family, but in family of warriors. So, Gerald, what do you say about what's going on?
Well, yesterday was a profound day in Georgia, again, because of the work of so many activists and, of course, the family's persistence in pushing for justice. We achieved the next step towards justice. And so I'm on the road to Brunswick, Georgia. I'm actually right outside of Savannah now to be with the family, to be with the Transformative Justice Coalition, Barbara and Daryl and so many others to celebrate, but also to refocus ourselves on the next step, which would be Jackie Johnson. But, you know, having been in the courtroom to listen to the closing arguments and seeing, you know, some of the evidence, it was quite clear, and I agree with you, CK, this was a slam dunk case from the very beginning. You know, many lawyers thought, you know, they didn't want to call it. I mean, anytime the verdict comes back in 2.5 hours, you should already know what's about to happen. So, you know, it felt good to see the jury and to see the foreperson, the black man that was the foreperson. I kind of figured he was a foreperson when I was there. I was like, something feels different about this jury. And it was a more diverse jury than the murder trial jury. And they got to hear all the evidence. And so I think that, you know, it was the right decision. It made me question some aspects of the state murder trial because, you know, the racial animus evidence was the motivating factor, the motive in the murder. And so I don't know how you try to prove a murder without, you know, motive. But, you know, the Justice Department did a great job in presenting the case. The federal defenders did what they could with the defense. I mean, there was no defense. And so I think it was the right decision. And I'm happy to be, you know, continue to stand with the family and stand with the activists who pushed this. And I think people need to really understand that for 74 days in Brunswick, Georgia, they tried to cover this up. The criminal justice system tried to cover it up. But for the strength and fortitude and tenacity of Wanda Cooper Jones and Marcus Arbery and all of the family, they would have succeeded. But for them pressing and getting other activists and organizations involved, and then ultimately the stupidity of Greg McMichael in releasing the tape that was filmed by William Rodney Bryant, the world would never have known what the family always knew, and that was Ahmaud Arbery was hunted and lynched on a public road in Georgia.
CK, well, let's go to Daryl Jones. Daryl Jones, what did you see?
Well, you know, Santita, thank you for having me back on the show. The UNCK is always a great time to speak to you all, and thank you for the platform for all of America to hear what has happened down here in Brunswick, Georgia. You know, let me start by saying that today is a very special day. You know, today is the day 2 years ago that Ahmaud Arbery was killed. This is that day. So for this jury verdict to come in the day before the second anniversary of the killing was just very significant for the family, just very significant. And it changes the whole tenor of the day and how they approach it. You know, Wanda Cooper Jones, I think, termed it best when she called yesterday a Super Tuesday. And it was, you know, it was a Super Tuesday for justice in America. It was a Super Tuesday for justice in Georgia and in Brunswick. You know, what Robert Patillo was laying, what Gerald Griggs was laying out was exactly on point with regards to the jury. But one of the things that, you know, people did not have the opportunity to see from outside the courtroom was that when the young brother came in that was the foreman of this jury, number one, you got to appreciate that he's maybe 35 35, 36 years old. He had the same hairstyle, the twisted hair that Ahmaud had. So he's sporting the same style. When he goes to stand up, when the jury was polled, he starts quivering, his voice starts breaking, and you could see him overcome with the emotion as he is wiping his eyes to say that he was agreeing with this verdict and that this was the proper verdict. That was such an incredibly powerful moment, and it seemed like it's like the perfect ending of the trial, where you have something that started because of the killing of these three white men of this young black man, to now have the young black man be at the foreperson of the jury that says you're guilty of it, and the judge will be able to sentence you at the appropriate time. It just seems as though it was the moral arc that was at play in that particular moment. But I tell you, Santita, another really moving moment, and there were so many moving moments in this trial, and you have to really take hats off to this Arbery family, because they showed the strength, they showed the grace, they showed everything while this was going on for their child. One of the other most moving parts here that happened, I think, for the first time, we had the opportunity to see the shotgun that was used to kill Ahmaud out, because it was boxed up and taped up as evidence, so no one had seen it other than the prosecutors. When the shotgun was pulled out of that box to be displayed to the jury, both the mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, as well as the father, Marcus Arbery, had to leave the courtroom for that moment. It was still stained with Ahmaud's blood. So, it was such an incredibly powerful moment, but it's one that, it shows the strength of that family to want to say that I'm going to stand there and I'm going to watch this. This is my child. I need to see this through. And that's what they were doing. So, in terms of the trial, it was just an incredible experience for all of America to now witness. What I'd like to say, and I'll stop on this, one of the things that I'd like to say is that 1955, Mamie Till made the decision to open the casket so all the world could see what happened to Emmett Till. In 2021, Wanda Cooper Jones and Marcus Arbery made the decision to push forward with the full federal hate crimes trial, because they wanted all America to see the casket of hate that went into the killing of Ahmaud Arbery. And that's what I think this federal trial was all about.
CK, we have about a minute and a half before we go to the break. We want to hear from Robert Patillo, but I think we should hear from him on the other side of the break. CK,
I agree.
Let me ask you this really quickly, and I want everyone to call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. There are a lot of things I want to address. I'm so glad that they have been able to take us inside of the courtroom to see the emotion, to feel the emotion. I want to know about the plea deal. I want to know about Ahmaud Arbery's mother saying, "Hey, DOJ, I didn't like the way this almost happened." And then you had Merrick Garland. There was a lot that happened yesterday. He became emotional.
There was a lot that happened.
It was a lot that happened, and then prosecutorial misconduct. Because this case is about that too, CK. The last minute belongs to you.
It is about all the above. Well, let me just address this. There was, as we know, the federal hate crimes lawsuit was filed. And at some point, which is routinely the case, whenever you have a trial, when there's litigation in criminal cases, there were discussions about a plea. And Travis McMichael and his father were in a position, and they had reached a plea agreement. Now, the Justice Department said that they thought the family was okay with this. So when it was presented to the judge, the family said, "Oh, no, we are not okay with this." And they want to go forward with the trial. And this is why it's so important for us to elect judges and watch their record. Because this judge said and took into consideration the family's objections and did not sign off on the plea deal. It could have gone a different way if we had, say, for instance, Judge Chu. I digress.
Absolutely.
So that's really important. And that's really important because but for that, we would not have had the benefit, the world would not have been able to see the manifestation of hate crimes, what it means. And it's so important.
Absolutely.
That evidence did not come out in the state case. But we're going to come back after the break.
I don't want you to speak to that, but you're going to hear from Robert Patillo, because I'm like, how can you have, as Attorney Griggs said, how can you have a murder without a motive? How could you leave all of this racism, all of this evidence of racism out of the case? When we come back on the other side, I want you to speak to that. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show. Call us at 773-763-9278. Legal Q&A with CK right here on the Santita Jackson Show. Okay. All right, you guys, when you all hear my voice, I'm trying to get, you know how it is. I'm trying to get out on break. I've got this government clock sitting up in my face. Not government, government clock.
and I have set my clock to that government clock too.
Oh my, that's what my brother Jesse calls it. He says, no, that's government. I love that boy. Oh my gosh. But there's a lot here. And so there's a lot to unpack, and I'm going to toss it to you. But, of course, we're going to go to Robert Patillo, and then we've got some callers, but, just take your time and make the case.
I think, Santita, this is historic on so many levels. There's the verdict that's historic, but that's not why this case is historic. It's historic because I don't recall in my lifetime, since I've been following this, and I started to do some research yesterday, a hate crime case like this that has been prosecuted by the Justice Department. So this is huge.
Okay, I'm getting voicemail for Mrs. Wells.
Not of this magnitude, and not that got this kind of attention. So that's really important. And maybe the Justice Department will take on more of these cases, because hate crimes have always been prevalent.
Yeah. Well, I'm just glad that, this is why we have to lift up the Arbery family. And I really don't like the fact that they continue to separate Ahmaud Arbery's mother and father, because all you're seeing is her mother. And there's been virtually no acknowledgement of his father's role and of their joint role in pushing for justice for their son.
Santita, that's just how the media has chosen to portray it. But I think that we're going to see more and hear more about that as we get closer to Jackie Johnson's trial.
I think that we have to talk about it. We're going to have to put it out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sorry. I had to jump in there because, this is the politics of how they really break down black men. They act like they don't count. They act like they don't care about their children. They're not present in their lives. That is not true. It's a lie. It is a lie. And I shouldn't have to wait for 2 trials, one of which almost did not happen, to find out that Ahmaud Arbery had a father who loved him, who was responsible for him, responsive to him, and pushed for justice for his son.
Right.
He wasn't hatched.
You make a great point.
What is that? He wasn't hatched? I get tired of that, because people come to me all the time and say, oh, your mother did such a great job. I'm like, honey, stop. I got a mother and a father, okay? The lights, the gas, tuitions were paid, all that stuff was on and cracking in our house, okay? And our parents did that together. My father didn't say, I made this money. No, he said, no,
1 minute.
This is what I'm doing for our family. This is what your mother and I do this together. I am tired of that. And it's a political decision, and we need to push back against that. They just have him have Ahmaud Arbery's father just standing off to the side. I'm like, no. This man got in his truck and drove all the way back. No one told him that his son had been killed, but he had a feeling something horrible like that had happened. And then he went to the death scene while the blood was still on the ground. Oh no, someone needs to tell his story and lift him up. I'm tired of that. And I'm going to push for black fathers because they love their children too. How about that? Girl, I don't like that. I don't like it. Oof. I don't like it.
10 seconds.
Accepting of that. No, we don't need to be accepting of that. And that's why
the media pushes it.
To raise all these issues.
The media pushes it. It's about the mothers. Yeah. Honey, it's about parents. Mothers don't spawn children. They have them.
change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's Legal Q&A with CK. We have been talking about this extraordinary Arbery family here on the Santita Jackson Show. And so we want to, we've been trying to reach Shapiro Wells today, but we might not be able to get in touch with her, but she's having a big event in celebration of the memory and the life of her son, Courtney Copeland. And I want you to go call her at 708-526-4546, 708-526-4546. They're having a gala, and you can enjoy it virtually, you can enjoy it in person, and they have a lot of programs with this Memorial Foundation. They really support the families who've lost their children, whose children have been killed in some kind of something with the police, or who are looking for justice for their children, just like this case. And I want you to support them, support Shapiro and her family, and we're all family here. So please call them at 708-526-4546. You might not be able to attend yourself, but you can buy a ticket, and maybe it'll help someone else to attend this event. It's going to be something fantastic, and it'll be on the anniversary of her son's killing. And so let's give Shapiro and all of these families some support. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, we've got Attorney Robert Patillo, who has not yet spoken. We had Attorney Griggs, who is on his way into Brunswick. And of course, we have the chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Attorney Darrell Jones, with us. But Robert Patillo has a lot to say about this, C.K.
Absolutely. And, Rainbow Push was present.
Mm-hmm.
Reverend Jackson was present in the courtroom, but Rainbow Push was also present there from the beginning, working very closely with Transformative Justice Coalition, as they do in a lot of instances. And so Robert Patillo, in particular, has followed this, covered this, discussed this internationally. And so we really want to hear from him, his perspective. What does he have to say about it, with all the hats that he wears as an extraordinary lawyer?
Oh, yeah. And now a preacher. Robert Patillo, are you still there? Or is he on mute?
He's still on the line.
All this brilliance that goes on mute, I can't take it. Well, let me ask you this, CK, and I'll ask you and Attorney Darrell Jones. We'll find out where Robert Patillo is. What about prosecutorial misconduct? Because we had the state trial, we had the federal trial, which was a hate crime trial, but now we hear there's going to be yet another trial, and it'll be about the prosecutors. What's going on there?
Absolutely. And I'll just say a little bit, and then Darrell, if you could pick up. See, this is the thing. So in the state case, we saw a lot of evidence of the actual murder. Race was not an issue, so we didn't really hear. And that was by design. That was a strategy. They did not want to make it about race. Whatever they did, it worked in terms of getting a conviction. So I'm not going to be critical of that. But of course, it was only part of the picture. So now we have that's why it was so important to have this hate crime case, because that's the second part of the picture, but there's a third part of the picture. And that will illustrate the tenacity, diligence, and flat out refusing to be denied of the Arbery family. And that had to do with the prosecutorial misconduct. Before we even knew or heard about this case, there was a prosecutor who tried to tank the case, who tried to manipulate, who engaged in prosecutorial misconduct and illegal activities. And because of that, she has her own criminal trial that is coming up. So that's the third part. It's a trifecta effect that this family has faced and fought against. In fact, it was led by primarily Marcus Arbery, an effort, but the family stood together, an effort to get that prosecutor removed, and they had a write-in candidate who won and beat her and got her out of office. So it's a really, really important case as well, because that will tell the complete story once we hear about that.
Wow.
And see the evidence in that case. And that evidence is going to be yet different from the evidence in the state case, the evidence in the hate crime case, the federal case, completely different. And then people will see the type of injustice that many families confront on a daily basis, because the Ahmaud Arbery family is one of many.
So many. But what about this prosecutorial misconduct, Attorney Darrell Jones? What happened? What did they do? And what could be the possible penalty for what they have done, for what they have been accused of having done?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question, Santita. And what we know with Jacqueline Johnson, who was the state's attorney who was in charge of Brunswick County at the time that this occurred, is that when this murder occurs, Gregory McMichael was a former Glenn County police officer and also an investigator that had worked for Jackie Johnson's office. So after his son, Travis McMichael, and Greg McMichael kill Ahmaud Arbery, what Gregory McMichael subsequently does, on the scene, is that he calls Jackie Johnson, his former boss, to say, "I need some help. Just kill somebody." And Jackie Johnson subsequently directs the police officers to stand down, to not arrest them, to not take them into custody. They are not arrested. It gets worse because what happens after that is that Travis McMichael is brought in for questioning and then released. Gregory McMichael is never brought into the police station. William Roddy Bryden is never brought into the police station immediately for questioning. Matter of fact, Gregory McMichael is covered with Ahmaud's blood. He went up to the body as it laid in the street and turned it over and had blood all over his hands, wiped it all over his shirt. Jackie Johnson directs Gregory McMichael to go home and wash the blood off of him, to clean it up. Go clean up. And then, as CK was correctly pointing out, it was Marcus Arbery who was in Florida at the time. He was an over-the-road truck driver. When he was in Florida, that's when he receives the phone call about Ahmaud being killed and what had happened. And when he returns, he drives overnight from Florida back to Georgia to get home, to get to the scene to see what is going on by himself in that truck. Emotions running wild through his head. Well, he ends up trying to find out what happened. He was just trying to get answers as to what happened to his youngest child. And they refused to give him any information. Jackie Johnson refused to talk to him, to provide him information. When she did speak to him, what did she say to him? "Don't worry about it, Mr. Arbery. I got your back. I got your back." But would not meet with him anymore. It wasn't until Marcus Arbery, and again, this every day, he's going down to her office demanding to see the evidence of what happened. Show me, what do you have? What happened to my boy? Tell me something. And finally, they learn of the existence of this tape, and he demands the release of the tape. And it's at that point when Gregory McMichael knows that Marcus Arbery is aware of this tape, they're after this tape to get it released, but they figure they'll do a preemptive strike and try to release this tape to try to make it look more favorable for the McMichaels. That's how that tape gets released. And everything that Jackie Johnson was doing in this situation, that is why she ended up being charged with the obstruction in this case and charged with the misuse of her office and not investigating the case properly. That's how she ended up being indicted. And it was all a tribute to the strength of the Arbery family in going through to be certain that justice for Ahmaud would happen. This is not, Santita, and I say this, and I say it 1,000 times. This is not a case to point to say this shows how well the justice system works because it had the right conclusion. No. This shows where the justice system is broken down because a family should not have to fight like this for justice.
At every single turn.
That's the whole Jack and Jack proof.
At every single turn. And that's why, we're not being repetitive. Robert Patillo, I understand we have Robert back. He was on mute, CK and Darrell, but it's important, all this brilliance on mute. But you know what? It's what's a... Girl, we had queued him up.
You've been talking on mute.
We got you. We ready for you. And then where are you? Out there in rock and roll heaven. But so what do you say? Because Darrell makes a great point that this is not how justice works so well. It's like no. This is part of the genius of America. Dr. King said, we have the right to fight for the right, And so built into the system really is your right to fight and push and make it work for you. It will work when you work it. So your thoughts? Get off mute. Are you there?
I'm here now. Just so you know, everything I said on mute was brilliant. It was amazing.
I know it.
Look, people have been celebrating this case, as an example of, well, we finally got a hate crimes conviction. We finally got a conviction for murder, first degree. Do you realize how perfectly things had to line up in order for that to happen? How a nearly 1 in a billion type of confluence had to happen, where you have somebody who videotaped the entirety of the murder beginning to end, and that finally they preemptively released that because of whatever reasons. And then when you get to the hate crimes trial, you have text messages between the individuals using racial slurs and animus in order to prove intentional discrimination. You have the prosecutor who lines up perfectly. You have the social justice movement that just happened to be happening on a global level at the exact same time this was all taking place. If any one of those things is not happening, you don't have the outcome in this case that you have. So instead of it being an example of the system working well, it shows you just how broken the system has to be. That this, even with all of that, this still nearly did not happen if it was not for the tenacity and the stick-to-itiveness. If it wasn't for the energy and the passion of the Arbery family standing up and not taking no for an answer, this all would have fallen through the cracks, just as so many other cases have. So this has to really be that push that we need to reform many of these laws on the federal level. When it comes to this issue of hate crime, because they set a standard so high that we've seen in many cases, even where there's very clear indications that that these murders have taken place, that it was a racial animus, because it wasn't on videotape, because there weren't text messages, because there weren't phone calls, because they didn't have a Confederate license plate, and on all these things, that it's impossible to get a conviction, or even impossible for the Justice Department to step in and prosecute. There's always these calls saying, well, why does the DOJ investigate? We have to look at the statutes and the nearly impossible barriers that they put in place in order to get convictions. Last time we updated these things was during the Obama administration with the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Hate Crimes Act. We need to be looking at opening these things up larger to make it easier for federal prosecutors to bring these types of hate crimes investigations and to get more convictions in the cases, because the criminals, the folks on the other side of justice, have had 30, 40, 50 years to figure out how to cover their tracks and not be this dang dumb. But we can't count on that in every case. So we just take this as being a example of what can happen when you provide prosecutors with the proper factual basis and information, but also as an example of what needs to happen in reforming our criminal justice system to ensure that our rights are actually protected. And you don't need an impossible barrier in place in order to actually be able to bring these folks to justice.
CK, let me take at least a couple of calls. I want to get some comments from Noel from Chicago. Noel, what's on your mind?
Yeah, good morning, Ms. Jackson. How you doing?
Good morning. Wonderful hearing your voice. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so in a state case, they did not bring the motive of the racial motive up, because if those three had been found not guilty, you cannot try them again for the same charges, because that would have been double jeopardy. So if you brought up the racial hatred in Georgia in a state case, and they were not convicted and they were found not guilty, you cannot take that same charge to the federal level. That would have been double jeopardy. That's why they did not bring those specific charges in Georgia. And secondly, there was no hate crime law on Georgia's book. That's why.
Okay. Well, just attorneys, what say you? Would this have been double jeopardy if they had talked about the racism in the state trial and then wanted to pivot to the federal trial?
I have a slightly different view. There was a strategic decision made, and the prosecutor said it, in the state court case, not to interject race. What they did, and this is what lawyers should do, they looked at the jury, they read the dynamics, and decided that that was not what they needed to do. So I slightly differ. I don't know about the double jeopardy issue either, but in terms, I think this was an intentional strategy. And by the way, they were correct. They got the conviction. So I'm not going to be critical. I would have liked it to have been to focus more on race, but knowing that there was a hate crime case that would focus on that for me was sufficient because I knew that the evidence would come out. That's why I was very distressed when I heard about this plea deal, because I thought it was important for the world to see how a hate trial manifests itself, what it's like, so that people understand the exposure they can have if they continue to engage in this activity. Now, it's not just going to happen. We have to make sure we continue to push this dialogue, to push the conversation, push and push. There's thousands of cases pending like this, thousands of them. And it's not, and people, it's not going to be a miraculously all of a sudden the Justice Department is going to bring all these cases. You've got to have a lot of the elements that Robert indicated. The other element I would just add, Robert, is to what Robert said, is the tenacity of the Arbery family and God.
Amen. Amen.
All of that.
But but that's instructive, CK. I think it's important that we continue to bring that up. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, Attorney Darrell Jones, Attorney Robert Patillo, because people have to understand. We're going to, Matt, call Chappelle now, if you will, please, Mrs. Wells, because she is the one, her son was murdered. And she called me the night she called me from the hospital, CK. And I said, you know what? Unfortunately, she knew I've had a lot of experience with this. I said, I'm going to ask you to do something that is going to be about the hardest thing you could imagine. You're going to have to take notes. Every encounter you have, you need to mark it. You need to write it down. You're going to have to become your own investigator because you're not going to get any help. You're not going to get any help. You're going to have to do this yourself.
Well, and it is tragic that is where we are. But that's the wheels of justice. That's why we need criminal justice reform. That's why we need policing reform. All of these things. But in absence of that, we do have these cases where you've got strong advocates, strong prosecutors that are bringing the cases and laying the evidence. But let's also talk about the outside lawyers, the Ben Crumps, the Jill Griggs, the Robert Patillos, the people like me who stand in the cut if they need assistance when they're trying to shut them down, the Reverend Jackson, the
Okay, Mrs. Wells is ready.
Transformative Justice Coalition, the Darrell Jones, the Barbara Arnwine, day in and day out, not just here and there, but consistently. All of that has to happen.
And they need your support. These organizations need your support. You have to pay to get to Brunswick. You have to pay to stay in Brunswick. People, freedom's not free, everybody. Please, if there's an organization that you are into, please give them your support. If you cannot give them money, give them your time. And I hope you'll join us in Selma. I need you to come back tomorrow, Robert, and tell us about getting to Selma. We're going to be there March 5th through the 6th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. And of course, we're going to be taking a couple of buses from Chicago, from Rainbow Push. Call 773-FREEDOM. 773-FREEDOM. You need to take this pilgrimage to Selma. Let me get Paul from Seattle. Paul, what's on your mind?
Good morning, Santita.
Good morning.
Something you said a few minutes ago just tipped off a whole cascade of ideas. You said, Reverend King said that, Dr. King said that we've earned the right to fight for the right to fight for the right. And the first thing that hit my mind was, well, if our rights are endowed by God, why do we have to fight for them all the time?
Oh, the struggle continues, honey. The struggle continues.
Well, let me say something, just elaborate just a little bit. And I was thinking about this idea that the pushback, we don't want to teach critical race theory, as if anybody's teaching that in K-12 education. It's not being taught. And you can't teach that the Constitution is inherently racist.
But just a minute. I just was thinking about the concepts of originalism, and I love the idea that somebody expressed a few minutes ago that let's not think that this hate crime verdict shows that the system is working. No, it's not. It was like the fact that it even happened means that it was so undeniable. It overcame all of the pushback that it got from the very beginning. But I was thinking about the concepts of originalism and this idea about the Constitution being inherently racist. Okay, so, as much as it offends our sensibilities, we always say that the Dred Scott decision was, maybe it was rightly decided. Not because, who better knew the original intent of the Constitution than Chief Justice Roger Brooke Taney? He knew what the intent was, so it's not that the decision was wrong, it's the Constitution is wrong, right? That's what it means, because he knew what the Constitution intended.
Look,
that's what I'm saying.
I hear you. I hear you. And you know what's in the Constitution is the right to amend it, to change it. And so, it's just like Scalia was right in Bush v. Gore. He was right. You do not have a federally protected right to vote. You don't. You don't. That was never the original idea. But original intent, original intent had it had black men as 3/5 human. Black women, white women, brown women, red women, yellow women, nobody even counted. So, let's get with that. CK, I've got, let me give Chapearl, I want to give you 1 minute, and then CK, you're going to close this out. Chapearl, thank you for joining us today. I did my best to let people know about your event. Please talk to us about this, the Courtney Copeland Memorial Gala in memory of your son.
Yes, Santita, thank you so much for taking the reins for me. But yes, we are having our first annual Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation Gala. It's going to be on March 5th, and this will actually go to support all of the programs that we have here, which is our back to school program, our Christmas toy giveaway, our college scholarship, as well as also our Feed the Homeless program. So give us a call at 708-526-4546. You can purchase tickets on eventbrite.com. The keyword is Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation. And if you can't attend the gala in person, please consider donating a ticket to a mother who has lost a child, because we are sponsoring some mothers in order for them to attend this event. So once again, at 708-526-4546, 708-526-4546. Thanks so much, Santita.
Of course. Thank you so much. CK, want to remind people we're going to be on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And we're going to talk for about 15 minutes with attorneys Patillo and Jones about this case, because we want to continue to drive home a lot of the issues that that are still active. We saw a family that really pushed to get to get justice for their son. And they pushed against corrupt prosecutors, CK. Corrupt prosecutors. That's not even part of the national conversation. What these prosecutors tried to do, CK. The last minute belongs to you.
And I just wanted to underscore, it wasn't just one prosecutor, although Jackie Johnson was the one who orchestrated, in my impression, the corruption. But she brought in another prosecutor who was part of this, what I would call conspiracy to deny justice as related to the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. But she's going to now sit as a defendant, like the people that she prosecuted, in judgment with a jury in Brunswick, and let's see what happens to her. And we have to make sure that we follow this, because justice won't be served until that trifecta, the third part of this case, is concluded. Santita, this case, the Ahmaud Arbery case, the family, all the dynamics, the perfect convergence of factors reminds us that the struggle continues in a mighty way. In a mighty way. We cannot let up for a single second, because we have to remember that the week before, that terrible pill of injustice that we had to swallow with the sentencing of Kim Potter, that was like a knife in our heart. And I will never forget listening to Chapearl. I will never forget the tears that she shed from that sentencing. And we must never forget that is still happening. So let's register to vote. Let's watch who we elect. Let's look at the records of the judges. Let's support. If you can't, you don't have to get out there and protest, but you can support Rainbow Push. You can support Transformative Justice Coalition. You can support all these organizations who are there delivering results and who've always been there in the trenches. You can call your senator. You can call your congressperson. There's so much that we can do, but do something because the struggle does continue.
And victory what? Is certain if you continue with the struggle. You got to continue.
Struggle.
I can't stop. Don't stop. Won't stop. Hey, go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Let's hear some closing thoughts. And, so, we want to put a button on this. But we're going to continue to follow this case because now we want to see what's going to happen with these prosecutors. I cannot wait to hear what attorneys Jones and Patillo have to say about that. Legal Q&A with CK every Wednesday on the Santita Jackson Show. I love you, everybody. Stay right here for a little bit more. Santita Jackson Show. Amen. So what about this what about the prosecution of the prosecutors? Because no one is talking about that, Daryl and Robert. I mean, no one is talking about it. I mean, it barely rates a mention. It barely rates a mention, but it should be more than a mention. I mean, when you walk us through this, Daryl, the McMichaels calling, who is it? His father calling this woman, Gregory called this woman, and then what kind of what is going on in Brunswick? What is that? I mean, the corruption must be so deep. What else has happened down there? I mean, and shouldn't DOJ investigate them? I mean, because if they did this in such a cavalier fashion, what else have they done? What's the culture down there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Santita, because the question is, what else? All right, because if they do this, and we see this unfolding before the nation, right, with the microscope on them, what else is there? There's a whole bunch more that exists. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and we know that it even goes deeper because we know that Jackie Johnson, once the pressure was being put on her, handed it off to George Barnhill, who was a prosecutor in one of the neighboring counties. And Barnhill didn't even do that. There was never a state grand jury convened to go through the evidence in this case. Barnhill gets it from Jackie Johnson. He does a precursory review of it and then writes a letter really exonerating the three white defendants. And so, when you hear people talking about him being part and he should be investigated and prosecuted as well, that's what folks are speaking to. So, a lot of this, and I can tell you that I've never seen a prosecutor prosecuted because of their willful acts and obstruction of justice in a case. And so, this will probably be one of the very few cases in the nation that people will have an opportunity to see what goes into an investigation and what happened in this investigation, how it went so awry with regards to what happened with the Arbery family. One of the things, though, that CK and yourself brought up was one of the things that came out of both the state trial and the federal hate crimes trial that I think was extremely helpful, and I'm sure Robert would like to speak to it as well. We know that in the state murder trial, people must remember that 11 of the 12 potential black jurors were struck by the criminal defense attorneys. 11 of the 12. Only one survived and was able to sit on the jury. And when the state prosecutors challenged the reason that was used by the defense attorneys to strike all the black jurors, saying that was unconstitutional, what we call a Batson type challenge, the judge said, so long as they could provide a race-neutral reason, it was okay to strike them. And there was all kinds of just really small, real slight reasons that were given. Somebody's girlfriend talked about the case on Facebook, that kind of stuff would be a race-neutral reason to strike all of these black jurors. So one thing that that CK brought up, I believe, that needs to be addressed is that we know that standards have to be changed. There's got to be address a process that allows 11 of 12 black jurors to be struck and try to say that a fair trial is still being occurred in this situation. Similarly, in the federal hate crimes trial, the standard that was used, and I believe it was Robert that spoke over, or Gerald Briggs, they were saying that, for the federal hate crimes trial, the government had to prove that it was solely because of race that the murder occurs. That standard needs to be addressed because it should be a lower standard where they make a determination that race was a factor in the killing rather than the sole reason for the killing. So there's a lot that's unfolding from this that we'll have the opportunity to address.
Robert?
Well, very much piggybacking off of what Daryl said, I think we have to use this as a kind of being an instructive place because we really cannot expect this factual situation to appear in the majority of cases. We can't expect the George Floyd set of events to happen in the majority of cases, and we have to fix the system where it doesn't take a literal manna from heaven and the act of God to get a conviction. And if you think this is a rare occurrence what this prosecutor did, at the same time that the murder trial of the Aubreys was going on, there's another prosecutor in West Georgia, the Chattahoochee Circuit, who was also indicted for bribery, for changing police testimony, and he took a plea deal, was disbarred, and will be going to prison shortly also. So to have two prosecutors in the same state being indicted at the same time for misconduct, and that prosecutor was convicted in that case, and the prosecutor will be convicted in this case. We have to start looking more deeply into how the hell we are electing these prosecutors, and also how many people are currently behind bars because of prosecutorial misconduct. I think every defense lawyer, when you first start practicing, you are amazed and appalled by just the level of power and capriciousness that goes into many of these decisions. It's whether or not the prosecutor had lunch, might depend on if you get 10 years in prison or if you get probation, whether or not you guys are in the same sorority or fraternity, whether or not they met you at the social club. All those things can be factors because they have nearly plenary power at the local level. And these are, when we're voting, we vote on president, we vote on governor, vote on senator, Congress people. But those judicial races at the back of the ballot, when you're looking at state court judge, superior court judge, district attorney, state's attorney, solicitor general, those sorts of things, that's where the rubber really hits the road when we're talking about criminal justice reform. So we have to start educating the public more so when it comes to election season on how to make sure that they are putting the proper prosecutors in office, because it's easy to call for change on the federal level because that's something that somebody else needs to do. But on the local level, you have the power to replace these individuals with folks in your own community who will do a better job of being responsive to the needs for criminal justice reform. And that's how you stop these things from happening on a city-by-city, county-by-county level. But that takes a level of mobilization we have not gotten to yet, and that has to be the front of this movement.
Because that is what we have been doing in Chicago. Reverend has on the ground for more than 50 years. Having the Saturday morning forum every Saturday for more than 50, almost 60 years since he was a student at the University of Chicago. I mean, you have political education. Reverend will have these judges, people who are running for judge, come and speak to the people and share their views. You must appeal to, if you don't have a Saturday morning forum in your city, you must appeal to your church, to your pastor, if your pastor's really working for you, and have them reach out to these judges, because these pastors represent a nice chunk of voters, and have them come to your church or have them come to your social club, your sorority, fraternity, whatever it is, your block club. They should come and speak to you because you're voters. You need to do that. And you also need to look at a corporate media, who will not share these stories with you. They're not that busy. They can come up with another documentary on Bill Cosby. But we have all this stuff that affects our lives from day to day that they will not touch. Oh, yeah. You need to make these people be responsive because they are responsible for a lot of the chaos that we're living with right now. And you need to know Jackie Johnson. You need to know these prosecutors and what they did. You need to know that as well as you know that this young man was chased down like he was not even human by these three men. You should know what these prosecutors did too. It's a whole ecosystem of corruption and racism and misogyny that contributes to this poisonous atmosphere in which we find ourselves living, not just locally, not just nationally, but globally. Attorney Jones, would you like to say anything before we close? And before I go to, I'm going to pivot to you, from you to Robert Patillo. What should we be looking out for?
Yes,
What's
Santita.
next? What's next, Daryl? What's next?
Yep, I think what's immediately next is that we have got to be certain that we are fighting on the front of getting people out to vote and getting registered to vote. That's the immediate battle, because we know that it's the prosecutors that are elected, the judges that are elected. So we've got to get into the streets and be certain that we're getting people involved and we're keeping it out front. I think that's our big battle right now.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think that you're right. Attorney Robert Patillo, of course, on WAOK every Sunday from 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What's next?
Well, I think the next battle is going to be on these state and local races. We've tried to address criminal justice reform from the federal level. That's gone nowhere. We haven't really had hearings on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And even that law, even if passed, does not have enough teeth as currently constituted to affect the type of social change that we need. So it's going to have to be a district by district, city by city, county by county effort at criminal justice reform. We've already seen what the other side is doing. They started painting every effort at criminal justice reform as being soft on crime prosecutors, and liberal policies are causing a crime wave around the country. So they've already started branding it to try to roll back the progress we have made. We got to understand what they're doing on that side, fight back against it, and then expand the efforts we're currently making to try to reform the system.
Daryl, before you go over what Jackie Johnson instructed Gregory McMichael to do. Just give it to us one more time.
Absolutely. As Ahmaud laid in the street, his body shot, bleeding out, Gregory McMichael, who worked for Jackie Johnson, calls Jackie Johnson's phone, telling her what had happened, that he's been involved in the killing. She advises him to go home, wash the blood off of his body, clean himself up so that people cannot see what has happened here. That's the advice that she gave him, advising a defendant in a murder to go clean the blood off of. Telling the police, stand down, don't arrest any of them. That's incredible.
And you know what? Every time you come on this show, I want you to tell that over. And you know what, Robert? You need to tell that story over and over and over and over again. Because people need to know that that happened. People need to know that happened, that it was a prosecutor elected by the people who did that. They need to know that's what happened in this case. And they need to know why the Arbery family were so diligent and vigilant because they knew that it was not going to work. They knew that they had covered up this boy's murder. They knew what had happened. And everybody knew what happened. Everybody knew. But it took the courage of this family to push and push and push until they got justice. They had to do that. And you're going to have to do it too. You're going to have to do it. Nobody's going to do this for you. No. Mamie Till Mobley had to she had to push for justice for Emmett. She still hasn't gotten it. She still hasn't gotten it. But you know what? No one wants to have the last name Milam, Robert Patillo, or Bryant.
You're right about that.
You don't want that. You don't want that. No. You don't want that. You don't want to be Milam or Bryant, the men who led the murder of this child. You don't want that. So there's something there. Carolyn Bryant, if she sees a camera, she is running from it. Even after she told them, it didn't quite happen this way. This boy didn't make it past me. Oh, wow. Really? Wow. But she doesn't want to be on camera now. No. So you have to fight. You have to fight. You do. And that's the way it ought to be. You have to fight to get in this world. You have to fight to stay in this world. And then when you get to the right hand of the Lord, you're going to be asked what you did. You will be asked, what did you do when you were here? What did you do aside from breathe the air and eat the food? What did you do? Think about that, everybody. Everybody, a fight? Yeah, life is a fight. Look at the Bible. Look at the Quran. Look at the Torah. Everything. It's a fight. It's a fight for you to be a good person because you're fighting with your lesser angels. That's the way it is. Fight on and win. How about that? Attorney Gerald Jones, I love you. Attorney Robert Patillo, I love you. I think you all are just brilliant, brilliant men. And I just thank God for you and the work that you do. So now I got to leave you all now.
Love you back, Santita.
Oh, thank you so much, my sweet. I'm sending you a big virtual hug and fist bump too. Because now I got to get out of here and go get some petitions because my brother is running for Congress and I have got to get some signatures so he can be on the ballot. How about that piece? So let me go and do that. I've got to do that today because we have 13 days. I love y'all. Thank you so much. And Matt, thank you for a wonderful show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. God bless you, my morning stars. I love you, love you, love you, love you, love you. So I got to get on out of here. Love you. God